Please, you have to help us.
The stagecoach rattled out of Tucson at dawn, the sky still bruised with night, the air sharp enough to cut lungs. 6 passengers climbed aboard under the watchful eye of the shotgun guard, a grizzled man named Pike who chewed tobacco like it owed him money. The driver, a whip-thin Irishman called O'Malley, cracked his reins and cursed the 6 mules into motion. Dust rose in a red curtain behind them as they left the adobe walls and scattered jacales behind. Inside, the benches were narrow, the leather cracked and hot even in the early chill. Harlan Drake took the rear corner seat facing forward, his long legs stretched as far as the space allowed. He wore black broadcloth cut fine enough for a city banker, but the colt on his hip and the scars on his knuckles told a different story. At 38 he owned 40,000 head of cattle, 100 vaqueros, and half the water holes between the Santa Cruz and the San Pedro. Men called him the Baron of the Border, though never to his face. His face, weathered and hard, gave nothing away. He had buried his young wife 5 years earlier after a fever took her in 3 days, and since then he had lived alone in a big house on a hill, speaking mostly to horses and foremen. Across from him sat Eliza Thorne, veiled in black crepe, holding a bundle that squirmed and already fretted. She was 30, perhaps 32, tall and straight-backed even in exhaustion. Her husband, a small-time prospector named Will Thorne, had been shot dead in Contention City 6 weeks before over a disputed pot in a faro game. The killer had walked free because the saloon owner feared Harlan Drake's wrath more than the law. Eliza had left town that same night with $10 sewn into her hem, a carpetbag, and the baby that was not hers. The other passengers settled uneasily. A Bible-thumping preacher named Brother Josiah Whitcomb clutched his worn testament and eyed the widow with sympathy. A newlywed couple from Ohio, Clara and Elias Grant, clung to each other like children in a storm. And a traveling drummer named Silas P. Greer rattled his sample case of elixir bottles and complained about the heat before the sun was fairly up. The baby began to cry before they cleared the edge of town. At first it was only a whimper, the sound of hunger or discomfort. Eliza rocked it gently, murmuring the soft nonsense words women use. But the trail was rough, the coach swayed and jolted, and within an hour the whimper had become a steady wail. By the second hour it was a shriek that sawed at every nerve. Greer was the first to break. "Ma'am, I paid good money for this seat. Can't you quiet that child?" Eliza's voice was low, steady. "I'm doing what I can, sir." Brother Whitcomb offered a prayer. Clara Grant pressed her hands over her ears. Elias tried to look stern but only managed frightened. Even Pike, up on the box, shouted down once, "Lord Almighty, that young un's got lungs like a steam whistle." Harlan Drake sat motionless, staring out the window at the passing saguaro and creosote. His gloved hands rested on the ivory head of a walking stick he did not need. Once or twice his gray eyes flicked toward the widow and the child, then away again, as though the sight was an irritation he could ignore if he tried hard enough. The crying went on. It rose and fell with the motion of the coach, but never stopped entirely. The baby's face turned red, then purple. Tiny fists beat the air. Eliza tried everything, feeding from a bottle of condensed milk warmed against her skin, a sugar teat, walking the narrow aisle as best she could while the coach lurched, singing fragments of lullabies her own mother had sung. Nothing worked. The child screamed as though the world itself hurt. By noon the temperature inside the coach was infernal. Dust sifted through every crack. The passengers sweated through their clothes. Greer cursed openly now. Brother Whitcomb quoted Job about patience. Clara Grant began to cry in sympathy. Elias muttered about changing stages at the next station. Eliza's arms trembled with fatigue. Her veil clung damply to her face. She had not slept more than an hour at a time since taking the child. Fear had kept her awake as much as the crying. Fear of pursuit, fear of what Harlan Drake might do if he learned the truth. Because the baby was his. She had known it the moment the dying woman pressed the bundle into her arms in that dark alley behind the Lucky Dollar Saloon. Rose O'Hara, 19, red-haired, pretty in a brittle way, had staggered out bleeding, knife work from a botched procedure in a back room. Her eyes were already glazing, but she had strength enough to gasp, "His name's Harlan Drake. Rich cattleman. He'll kill me if he knows. Promise you'll keep the boy safe." Then she crumpled, dead before she hit the ground. Eliza had stood frozen, listening to the uproar inside the saloon where her own husband lay shot. She could have left the child there. No one would have blamed a grieving widow for walking away. Instead she had wrapped the baby tighter, run through back streets to the livery, and bought passage on the first stage west with the last of Will's poker winnings. Now the man who had fathered the child sat 3 feet away, staring at desert as though it might swallow the noise. The baby's cry reached a new pitch, a sound so desperate it seemed the tiny body must break. Eliza stood suddenly, swaying with the coach's motion. Passengers shifted to let her pass. She stopped directly in front of Harlan Drake. Every eye turned. She held the child out toward him. "Take him," she said. Her voice carried over the screaming, quiet but unyielding. Drake did not move. His face was stone. "Take him," she repeated. "He's yours." The words hung in the thick air like gunsmoke. Greer's mouth fell open. Brother Whitcomb's Bible slid from his fingers to the floor with a thud. Clara Grant gasped so sharply she choked. Elias stared as though watching a theater tragedy unfold. Drake's eyes lifted slowly to the child's face. For the first time he truly looked. The screaming never paused, but something shifted behind the cattleman's gaze. The shape of the brow, the wide-set eyes, the stubborn set of the mouth even in fury, there was no mistaking it. Eliza did not lower her arms. His mother was Rose O'Hara. She danced at the Lucky Dollar last spring. You spent time with her. She told you she was carrying your child. You paid her to leave town. She didn't leave far enough. She died the night my husband was killed, begging me to keep him from you. Drake's jaw flexed. A muscle jumped in his cheek. I never touched any whore named Rose. The word cut like a quirt. Eliza did not flinch. You did, she said softly. And you lied to her the way powerful men lie to girls with no protection. She believed you'd come for her. When you didn't, she tried to end it herself. The baby lived. She didn't. Silence fell inside the coach, broken only by the endless crying and the creak of harness leather. Drake's gloved hand rose, hesitated in the air, then brushed the edge of the blanket. The baby's flailing fist caught one finger and held on with surprising strength. The scream hitched, turned into a sob, then quieted to whimpers. Every passenger exhaled at once. Drake stared at the tiny hand gripping his. Something raw crossed his features, anger, grief, recognition, all at once. You could have written a letter, he said at last, voice low. Demanded money. Blackmailed me. I thought about it, Eliza admitted. Then I thought about the kind of man who would pay a girl to disappear rather than face his own blood. I decided to see for myself what kind of man you truly are. Outside, the desert stretched empty and burning. Inside, the tension was thicker than the dust. Brother Whitcomb cleared his throat. This is a weighty matter. Perhaps when we reach. He never finished. A rifle shot cracked in the distance. Then another, closer. O'Malley's voice rose in a wild Irish curse. Apaches. Hang on. The stagecoach whipped into a gallop. Horses screamed. The coach lurched violently, throwing passengers against one another. Pike's shotgun boomed from the box. Drake reacted without thought. He pulled the baby from Eliza's arms and cradled it against his chest with one arm while his other hand flashed beneath his coat. The colt appeared as if by magic. Eliza dropped to her knees, clutching the seat strut. Greer shrieked and dove for the floor. Clara buried her face in Elias's shoulder. Warriors burst from an arroyo, 8-10 painted ponies thundering alongside. Feathers streamed. Rifles flashed. An arrow thudded into the side panel inches from Drake's head. He braced his boots, shielded the child with his body, and began to fire, steady, deliberate shots through the window. One warrior tumbled backward off his horse. Another clutched his side and veered away. Eliza saw shattered glass beside Brother Whitcomb and acted. She snatched the fallen Bible, used it to smash out remaining shards, giving Drake a clear field. Their eyes met for an instant over the chaos. Gratitude flashed in his, determination in hers. Pike's shotgun roared again and again. O'Malley lashed the team toward a rocky defile where the coach might find cover. Bullets whined. One punched through the roof and buried itself in the seat cushion between Greer and the Grants. Greer fainted. Drake fired until the Colt clicked empty. He reloaded one-handed without looking, the baby still tucked safely against him. The child, incredibly, had stopped crying entirely, staring wide-eyed at the flashing muzzle. Another warrior went down. The rest broke off, vanishing into heat shimmers like ghosts. The danger passed as suddenly as it had come. Smoke and powder stink filled the coach. Everyone breathed in ragged gasps. Drake holstered the pistol and looked down at the infant in his arms. The baby gazed back solemnly with eyes the exact shade of his own, storm gray shot with blue. Eliza reached out, not to take the child, but to touch its cheek beside Drake's large hand. "His name is Caleb," she said quietly. Rose wanted him to have a Bible name. Drake tested it. Caleb Drake. The word sounded foreign and inevitable at once. He looked at Eliza then, really looked, as he had not before. He saw exhaustion in the lines around her eyes, courage in the set of her mouth, and something else, loneliness that matched his own. "You kept him alive," he said. "Through all this. I promised a dying woman. That promise could have cost you your life today." "It nearly did," she answered. "But so did staying in contention." The coach slowed. The horses were spent, lathered, and trembling. Ahead lay the swing station at Coyote Wells, a mud adobe, a corral, a trough of brackish water. O'Malley pulled up shouting for fresh teams. Passengers stumbled out into the blinding sun, legs stiff, faces pale. Pike reloaded his shotgun and scanned the horizon. No pursuit showed. Drake stepped down last, still holding the baby. Eliza followed. For a moment they stood apart from the others in the thin shade of the Ramada. "I have a ranch," Drake said without preamble. 30 miles south of here. Big house. Good people. A woman who cooks better than any hotel in Tucson. Room enough for 10 children if need be." Eliza waited. "I'm offering marriage," he went on, voice rough. "Legal. In a church if that matters to you. For the boys' sake first. Maybe for ours later." Greer, overhearing as he swigged water from a canteen, let out a low whistle. Brother Whitcomb adjusted his collar importantly. "I am ordained in the Methodist Episcopal Church," he announced. "I could perform the rite as soon as we reach a settlement with a proper witness." Clara Grant began to cry happy tears. Even O'Malley grinned around his quid of tobacco. Eliza studied Drake's face. She saw pride there, the kind that had built an empire from nothing. She saw loneliness deeper than any desert canyon. And beneath both, something new and fragile, hope. "I won't come as a hired nurse," she said. "Or a convenience. You'll come as my wife," he replied. "Equal partner in whatever this becomes. The boy will have my name. You'll have my protection. And my respect, if I can earn it." She looked at Caleb asleep now in the crook of his father's arm, tiny mouth pursed in dreams. Then let us be married at the mission in San Xavier, she said. I want God and the desert both to witness it. Drake nodded once, the matter settled as far as he was concerned. Fresh horses were led out. Passengers climbed back aboard, chattering now like magpies about the attack and the sudden proposal. The atmosphere inside the coach had changed entirely. Where there had been irritation and fear, there was now something close to celebration. As the stage rolled south again, Eliza sat beside Drake instead of across. Caleb lay contentedly in her lap, one tiny hand curled around Drake's gloved finger. The sun lowered toward the mountains, painting the sky in blood and gold. Dust devils danced across the flats. Somewhere far off a coyote yipped. Drake spoke once more, quietly so only she could hear. I never wanted another child after losing Mary. Thought it would hurt too much to try again. But this boy, he's already mine in ways I can't deny. Eliza rested her head lightly against his shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. He's ours now, she murmured. And so are we. Night fell as they approached the mission. Lanterns glowed in the white-domed church. Brother Whitcomb prepared his book. The Grants agreed to stand witness. Even O'Malley and Pike promised to sign the register. They were married beneath a crucifix carved by Spanish hands 2 centuries earlier, the baby sleeping in a cradle of Eliza's shawl on the front pew. Vows were simple, spoken in the flickering light of candles that smelled of beeswax and desert pine. When Drake kissed his bride, it was brief, almost formal, yet neither pulled away quickly. Afterward they spent the night in the mission guest house, Caleb between them on a narrow cot, the 3 of them touching in sleep like shipwreck survivors clinging to the same plank. At dawn a ranch wagon arrived from Drake's headquarters, sent by telegraph from the last station. The foreman, a weathered Tejano named Ramon, lifted his hat in respect to the new señora and loaded their scant belongings. The big house on the hill was adobe and stone, cool inside even in summer, with cottonwood shade and a spring-fed garden few believed could exist in such country. Vaqueros stared openly at the woman in black who stepped down from the wagon holding the Patron's son. Word spread faster than wildfire, El Jeef has a wife and an heir, both delivered by Stagecoach and Apache bullets. In the weeks that followed, Eliza learned the rhythms of the ranch. She walked the corrals at sunrise, memorized brands, listened to Ramon's quiet reports of grass and water. She planted roses along the veranda in memory of a girl who had none. Caleb thrived, his cries now only the ordinary complaints of babies, hunger, wet, the need to be held. Drake watched her with the same intensity he watched prime breeding stock, but gradually the watchfulness softened. He brought her a side saddle from Tucson. Rode beside her across the pastures. One evening he led her to a hilltop where the whole valley lay spread below them like a green and gold ocean. I was going to die alone up here, he said. House full of leather and silver, but empty of everything that matters. She took his hand. Not anymore. Years later, when Caleb was old enough to ask about the scar on his father's shoulder, the one shaped like an arrowhead. Drake told him a story about a stagecoach, a brave woman in black, and a baby who screamed until the desert itself listened. And on quiet nights, when the wind carried the scent of creosote and distant rain, Eliza would stand on the veranda and remember a dying girl in an alley, a promise made in blood and terror, and the unthinkable thing she had done that changed 3 lives forever. The baby had screamed non-stop until a widow handed him to a rich cowboy who had never known he was a father. And out of that scream was born a family.